Right guys, here we go again, like a rubbish Kevin Talbot with remote control cars and a permanently unfinished truck. We got another workshop video. In this video, we fit alloy diff blocks to the FTX Outback Fury. So, diff blocks. Here is the alloy piece. Let's do a quick explanation of what it is and why we would change it. So you see, car's all nicely cleaned up from its last outing. Don't really bother with the shell, it's going to be trashed underneath anyway. So, in the last video, we upgraded the internal gearbox gears to metal. Now, along with everything else, we've got quite a lot of metal upgrades, leaving the diff blocks as a weak link, but where do they fit in? So, things that might go wrong as stock. You could strip the plastic gears in there that we've now upgraded. You may, so we've got the metal beadlocks that we run, plastic wheels that it comes with have got obviously a plastic hex. Now if your wheel gets stuck and your drive lies spinning round, you can round out the hex. That's one of the things that can go wrong. So first thing we did there was change to the metal wheels. So next thing in line, you've got the plastic wheel hex. Now again, in the same way that that can round off, this has the pin coming through the drive there. And say you upgrade the wheel, the pin can then spin round inside the hex, and that can round off. So we get over that with these metal hexes here. These are axial ones. And they've even got a little grub screw so that they won't spin. You know, you tighten that down and they find it hard to spin. Next in line, you got the drive shaft. Now these are metal, so you're pretty safe with those, although the front ones are quite weak until you upgrade to the CVDs. So there we go. So at the moment we've got metal in there to the prop shaft. You got metal wheels, metal hexes, metal drive shafts. Then when you go round into the back of the vehicle and take off the diff cover or the front of the vehicle, that is the stock diff block. And it's made of plastic with the metal ring gear attached. So what's happening there is it's sitting sideways like that with the gear running along the back of it. And if you look at the drive shafts, they've got flat bits and they go into the keyway. So with the plastic ones of these, that can spin around and muller the hole in there, and you end up with this being spun with the gear. That is no longer two flat sections and it's whizzing around without the drive shafts moving. So we're going to whip these out and replace them with metal. That way they can't round out the middles and your driveline is pretty well bulletproofed. Now it's going to be the same front and rear apart from a few bits. Well, no, it is going to be the same. The axles have got the steering attached and that. It's not really going to make a difference for the purposes of this video. So I'm going to do one, get the knack for it, put you back on for the other one. Okay, so I've done the front axle. It wasn't too bad. It's a bit trickier because you've got the sort of hub assembly to deal with when you're pulling drive shafts on the front, but all went together fine. So we'll move on to the back and we'll do a bit more of a step-by-step with what we're doing. So first of all, here's the new alloy diff block. There's the part number, FTX 9239. So the first thing you want to do is pull off your diff cover. It's 4 Allen key headed screws. Then gives you access to the diff block and bearings there. Then you want to pull your hexes, which with the standard ones you just pull off. If you got ones like this, loosen the grub screw and remove those. As I said in the last video, anytime you're in anywhere like this, check your bearings out as you're doing assembly, because it's a good time to check them out. Then I'm going to undo these 2 screws here, and at the front they're replicated by those screws on the hubs, and pull off that assembly. Before you do that, you just pull out, if it'll focus, pull out this pin here. Can't do it one-handed. You pull that pin and you pull the drive shaft out along with that, and you can check the bearings out. You can pull it without pulling the pin, but then you can't remove the bearing and check it. So do that bit, get back to you with what's next. Right, so once you've pulled the pin, you can slide off the end cap assembly, which has a bearing in. Obviously, if you don't pull the pin, you can pull all that off as one go, but I just like to have a look at the bearings, clean them up and check them, put a bit of grease in there. Drive shaft's then free to pull out, like that. Give everything a good clean up, so you're going to re-grease it, repeat that on the other side, and then you'll be ready to pull the block. So that's the drive shafts out, and the areas around them cleaned up. You'd be amazed how much dirt collects in there. As with any time you pull a shaft, you probably need some paper towel for afterwards. Giggity. So now you've got free access to the diff block, and again it's a two-handed job, so I'm not going to try and do it on film. But you sort of get in by these bearings, give it a pull, and it's going to come straight out. And that's what you're dealing with. You can see the end of the prop shaft drives that gear, which in turn runs on the ring gear, and then the drive shafts come out either side of that. But that being plastic could round off, and with the metal ring gear being screwed into the plastic casing, there's 4 screws under the grime there. That could also round the screw heads, and that could end up loose. So that's why we're going to replace it with the alloy one. So here's what we're swapping over, just the plastic section of the diff block. So you pull off the big bearings from either side, and then we're going to want to undo those 4 grease covered screws there. The ring gear is then going to come off, and we replace it onto that one. That's it blown apart there. Bearing, screws, gear, bit we're throwing away, other bearing. Now it does have a gasket in it, and I don't know why, because it doesn't contain any fluids. The only reason I can think, and I'm probably wrong, but is that that isn't a decent quality metal. It's maybe not stainless. So if there's any water ingress when you're wading, that could go really rusty. But I don't feel it needs the spacer or gasket, whatever it is. That being said, I did transfer it in the front, and I will transfer it across to the rear because it's not going to do any harm. And I'd rather find that, you know, like put it back together at work than find, oh, now it's a mil too short and it's not meshing correctly or whatever. So give it all a good clean up, slam it back together, and with any time you put screws into metal, you want some blue lock thread. Screws into plastic are fine, they bite. Screws into metal, blue lock thread. So let's waz it back together and look all shiny and pretty. Pretty as a picturelet, ready to go in. Nice, that's now solid alley. There's no plastic in there that can strip or be rounded. There's the screws, Loctited in, and got the diff casing. That is a lot. I know it's a lot of grease. Some of it's going to squirt out, but like I said last time, you know, that's just grease I use on that old thing. The bits that are worth saving anyway. And yeah, you know, it works. It is waterproof. It doesn't break down too much. You're not putting too much speed in it. And, you know, I check this a lot anyway. I like to rebuild a lot, so fine. So, satisfying squidgy goo moment. Keep squidging. There you go. That's home now. It's engaged. So, I'm going to clean some of that ooze off and pop the diff cover back on. Reassemble it. Put a little bit of grease on these drive shafts before you slide them back in, just so that when they go in the axle tube there, they carry a little bit of grease with them. Check all your bearings, and that's it really. You're good to go. Right, one point to mention, all of the screws that go into the rear axle housing are really, really easy to over tighten. The plastic here isn't very strong, so go really, really lightly. I was holding the Allen key like that, like just really gently. Don't put any force on, or you're going to end up buying an axle casing when you strip it out. So there we are, they're back together, they're cleaned up, fully greased. We now have metal diff blocks, metal drive shafts, metal hexes, metal wheels, and metal centre gears. So apart from the prop shafts, which I would like to upgrade, these do have metal ends, but the actual telescoping action of them, they run on these small grooves up here, and they're really notchy. So sometimes when the suspension wants to compress or drop, they sort of notch and they tug on this gearbox a little bit. So I would like to upgrade these. FTX do a set of metal ones that are sort of CVD style. They should slide really nicely. But that really should be a solid transmission now. You've just got, which you'll retain in almost any kit, the plastic spur gear. And that's easy to change, it's cheap. And if you don't have one thing that can give, you're just going to end up grinding stuff to oblivion. So we'll put her back together, get the wheels on. She's all ready for next time out. Cheers, guys.